they have to go along with the position of the Syrian regime. They don't speak into our interests. We, for example, as Mr. Saleh spoke, we want a recognition of our identity. None of the people on either side in Geneva speak about the recognition of the Syriac identity as a national identity. Nobody speaks about our constitutional rights. Right now, in the Syrian constitution, Syrian Christians, Syrian Syriac Christians are second-class citizens. And nobody is speaking for our demand to be equal citizens as Syrian Christians in Syria. So this is a major difference. And as Mr. Saleh and Mr. Peter spoke, we have been on the ground. We are now on the ground, and we just established in partnership and administration on the ground in Syria. We're not expats who have been living outside of Syria for 30 years, have never set a foot in Syria. I was a human rights activist in Syria. I am still the director of the Syrian Human Rights Organization. I was travel banned by the Syrian regime for 5 years. Mr. Saleh was jailed in Syria by the Syrian regime. We are not agents of the Syrian regime, as those expats claim. We have a history struggling for democracy in Syria that speaks for itself. I ran for parliament twice in Syria. I captured tens of thousands of votes. We have the right to represent the Syrian people and speak about their concerns and their dreams, not Syrian expats who have not set a foot in Syria for the last 30 years. They don't have the right to sit in Geneva and speak in our name. We don't want to end 50 years of dictatorship of the Assad dynasty to start a new dictatorship by expat appointed by outside powers.
في صدد انعقاد جنيف 2 كشعب سوري نمر في مراحل تاريخية حيث يتم فيها تقرير مصير الشعب السوري بأكمله.
As Syrian people, we are going through a very historical time where the future of Syria is being decided.
وكشعب كردي وسرياني عانينا الأمرين من استبداد وديكتاتورية النظام البعثي لسنين طوال.
And as Kurds and Syriacs, we have suffered for
سوري من بكرده وعربه وسريانه وبكافة مكوناته نسعى لبناء سوريا ديمقراطية حرة.
And in these times of emerging democracy, we Kurds, Syriacs, and Arabs aspire for a Syria that will be free and for all its people.
ونحن على كامل الثقة بأن الشعب السوري هو الوحده القادر على تقرير مصيره.
And we are confident that only the Syrian people is capable of deciding its
وأراد دائما أن يضم شخصيات كردية لكن بهوية عربية إلى الائتلاف.
And it has sought to have a Kurdish representation that has an Arabic embodiment of Arabic ideology.
ونحن كحركة المجتمع الديمقراطي
And we as the Kurdish Social Democratic
فعقدنا اتفاقنا كشعوب سورية ككرد وعرب وسريان والمكونات الأخرى في مناطق الجزيرة وكوباني وعفرين. عقدنا الاتفاق الاستراتيجي وقمنا ببناء الإدارة الذاتية في هذه المناطق.
This is why we have come together in coalition, Arabs, Kurds, and Syriacs in different areas on the land of Syria and the northeast and the areas of Kobani,
عفرين
and الجزيرة.
وبناء الإدارة الذاتية لا يعني الانفصال عن سوريا، إنما هو مشروع سوري بامتياز.
And establishing the self-rule does not mean at all separation from Syria.
وهو موديل مشابه لموديل سويسرا، موديل المقاطعات.
It's a model that is very similar to the model here of Switzerland where we are here.
ونعتمد الديمقراطية المباشرة كمبدأ أساسي لتحقيق الحرية في سوريا.
It's a model that seeks direct democracy for the purpose of establishing democracy throughout Syria.
موديل الإدارة الديمقراطية يضمن حقوق كافة المكونات وحقوق الإنسان والمجتمع المدني بأكمله.
A democratic administration will enable and ensure that genuine democracy is implemented throughout Syria.
في مقاطعة الجزيرة فقط حاليا يتم الاعتماد الثقافة أو اللغة الكردية العربية السريانية. نسبة تمثيل الجنسين في الإدارة الذاتية هي 40%.
So we have a representation based on gender that is 40%. We have 40% women representation.
والإدارة المشتركة التي تتشكل من امرأة ورجل كنظام رئاسي في الإدارة هو الأساس لنا.
And we have agreed that the leadership will be shared both by women and men.
لهذا نرى بأن تشكيل الإدارة الذاتية هو الاتفاق الأساسي الذي تسعى إليه جنيف لتحقيقه حاليا كحل سياسي. نرى بأننا حققنا الحل السياسي في المناطق التي نعيش فيها.
So what Geneva 2 is trying to achieve and arrive at, we have already achieved on the ground in the areas where we live.
Self-democratic ruling system which was erected in the north of Syria in people we are living over there. And because we believe, of course, I mean, we want, first of all, we want ceasefire. And this Geneva, this what happened yesterday is not going to bring any ceasefire, and it's not going to bring the peace, because still, the people are representing the coalition. For example, we have our forces. As YPG. YPG is representing the Kurds, the Arabs, and the Syrians all together, holding the weapon just to protect themselves, to defend themselves in their areas. And we can make ceasefire, but nobody is talking to us. We are the actual owners of this land and these areas, and we are authority over there. And we are protecting our people over there, against these groups. And till now, we are alone. This YPG, we didn't have any support from any side, and even support by diplomatic means, by political means, and by everything. Nobody supported us. We are still defending ourselves, protecting our people, erecting our systems, and we are on the ground. We are not represented in Montreux.
نحن ما نريد جنيف 2 تكون لوزان 1923.
We don't want Geneva 2 to become Lausanne 1923.
اللي فيه همش حقوق الشعب السرياني.
In which the Syriac people rights were marginalized and ignored.
الجميع الأغلبية الحاكمة تعتبر السريان مسيحيين عرب، مسيحيين أتراك، مسيحيين فرس وغير، ولكن ليسوا مسيحيين سريان كقومية.
So we have ruling governments like in Syria. They will consider the Syriac as a religious minority. In Turkey, they'll consider their Syriac citizen as a religious minority. The same in Iran, the same in Iraq. And they want to ignore the reality, the historical reality, that we are a people.
نحن ما نريد من جنيف أن تكون مؤتمر لتصفية حسابات بين طرفين فقط على السلطة، بين علوي وسني.
We don't want Geneva to be a place where a settlement is reached based on sectarian identity between Sunnis and Alawis,
أو صراع بين دول إقليمية
or to be based on struggle between regional powers,
أو تصفية حسابات لدول عظمى
or to settle, interest of international political
نحن نريد
actors.
نقول إنه العالم مخدوع هو بالوضع الموجود في المجتمع السوري.
We want to say that the world has been deceived about what is happening in reality on the ground in the social life in Syria.
سابقا النظام وصفه وكأن الجميع يعيشوا بسلام وكلهم متساويين.
In the past, the regime used to describe Syrian society as a society where all groups live together in peace.
واليوم نرى كذلك المعارضة توصفه وكأن الجميع ممثلين بداخل الائتلاف.
And then the so-called opposition wants to say that within the coalition, all the groups are represented within the coalition.
مؤتمر يدعو فيه الشعب السوري بكل قومياته وفئاته.
We want from Geneva to be a place where all Syrian groups and components be invited to sit at the table.
ليتناقشوا
to dialogue.
كيفية خلق نظام جديد.
And to dialogue and come to agreement on the form of the new Syrian political system.
نظام ديمقراطي يكفل.
A democratic system that guarantees.
يكفل حقوق كل المكونات المجتمع السوري.
That guarantees the rights of all components of the Syrian society.
والعدالة الاجتماعية.
And that guarantees social justice for all Syrian groups.
واليوم اللي نراه بشكل مختصر في جنيف نشوف انه هو في فقط تصفية حساب.
But what we see in Geneva, we see a table to make political compromises.
فأي حل
of political actors.
فأي حل يستبعد ضمان حقوق الشعب الكردي والشعب السرياني وباقي المكونات فنحن ما نشوفه انه حل جذري هو للحالة السورية.
So any political solution that does not include authentic representation of the Syriacs, of the Kurds, and of other Syrian groups, it's not going to provide a sustainable political peace in Syria. Thank you.
I want to add some points. My colleague mentioned to the Lausanne in 1923 is the same case for the Kurds also. Since 1923, because they didn't recognize the Kurdish being and Syriac being, so they were killing us for 1 century. So if we ignore the Kurds and the Syriacs again in Geneva 2, it means another century for killing the people. So we need to be recognized here as Kurds and as Syriacs as a being, and we should have our democratic rights. We are looking for and nothing more. We are not going to make, to kill anybody or to against anybody. No, just all we are struggling for is we are the owners of this struggle. We are owners of these lands, and we are representing our people. That's the point I want to make.
I can speak for the Syriac National Councils. We made many attempts to meet with Mr. Al-Ibrahimi, and he has not responded nor given us the opportunity to meet with him and explain our cause and case. I don't know about Mr.
Yeah, for our side, we have met him. We have met him, even his representatives in Damascus and here, and he just promised us to try his best to make us joining this one, but the decision wasn't with him, and even not by United Nations, because I think, especially for the opposition, United States, who was the decision by the United States to select the people who representing the Syrian people. So I don't know. Mr. Robert Ford was selecting or deciding whom to represent the Syrian people.
Oui. Yes.
سوريا تي في ستوكهولم شلوم عليكم نغنوا بسوريا language
the future of Syria as Syrians and Kurds. The second question he hasn't finished yet.
والثالث الجناح الثاني اللي هلا يصير يعني في نظرتكم يعني له مستقبل يعني في مقررات لتعطي الأمن المجتمع كوناته كل سوريا ومستقبل سوريا. شكرا.
The third question is how do we view Geneva II vis-a-vis its ability to fulfill the aspirations of the Syrian people for a democratic, just Syria for all Syrians?
Who wants to answer? Yeah, you.
بخصوص بناء سوريا المستقبل أعتقد أننا بدأنا بالخطوة الأولى نحو بناء سوريا المستقبل الديمقراطية في مناطق الجزيرة وكوباني وعفرين وهو سيكون النموذج لسوريا المستقبل.
As far as the first question, we have started the process of building Syria the future. We have started it with the establishment of the administrative self-rule in the areas of Jazeera, Kobani and Afrin. These will serve as the model for Syria of the future that is aspired for and worked for by the authentic Syrian people.
وبناء الإدارة الذاتية سيكون الضمان الأساسي تضمين حقوق الشعب السرياني والكردي في الدستور السوري.
And the building of this administration, self-rule administrations, will be the guarantee for the rights of the Kurds and the Syriacs in the new Syria, and Arabs in the new Syria.
أما بخصوص جنيف 2 نرى بأن هدف انعقاد جنيف 2 هو تحويل السلطة من يد إلى يد أخرى.
As far as Geneva 2, we see it as a means, as a tool to move power from one hand to another.
ولا يوجد للشعب السوري إرادة في هذا الاجتماع.
And the will of the Syrian people, the authentic will of the Syrian people, is not presented at Geneva 2.
لذلك لا هويات ضمن اجتماع جنيف.
Yeah, so there is no authentic representation of the Syrian will and Syrian people at Geneva 2. There was a question about how are we going to be able to react as Syriacs and Kurds, being a smaller number than the Sunni, and we as Kurds and Syriac and Arabs in our areas, we represent at least 5 million Syrian people. This is at least, but we have to also know that within the Sunni community, we have a substantial support for a democratic Syria that respects the identities of the Syriacs and of the Kurds and the Arabs on equal basis. So actually we believe that if we have a genuine democracy in Syria, we are the majority, not the minority.
Just for an explanation, I mean the minorities, because we have minorities in everywhere, and only the constitutions can guarantee the rights of the people. Even in European countries, you find minorities everywhere, but their rights are guaranteed by the constitutions, and that is what we are looking for. Even in Syria, there should be a constitutional agreement between all the society on the rights of the minorities also, and this is only the way to protect the minorities. Thank you.
Is there yes.
I wanted to follow up on my question earlier. One of you mentioned that you expect Geneva 2 to fail, but aren't you taking a gamble? You're taking a risk if it succeeds then if you're not seeking to play a constructive role, then at the end of it there will be momentum for the two parties or the talks which are going on in Geneva 2, and you will be left out. So is it not foolhardy to stay away from Geneva 2 and say that this is not going to succeed, because there's a risk that it might succeed? And second question, do you have any views on the future of Assad, which seems to have been dominating the opening debate?
We are an authentic part of the peaceful revolution. All of us, we here on this table, we were participating in the early revolution when it was peaceful demonstrations. And we support a political dialogue. And we have been involved in contacts with the international community over Geneva 2. And we want to be at the table of Geneva 2. And we believe that without the presence of us and other authentic representation of the Syrian people, Geneva 2 will not be able to come up with a sustainable solution. This is anybody, any political actor, international or regional political actor, who think that he can use Geneva 2 to make a political gain and gain influence in Syria without respect and consideration of the will of the Syrian people is mistaken. This is what we are trying to say. We are not against Geneva 2. We are saying that the way it is set up now, the way that it marginalizes Syrian popular powers, it is not a substitution to the 50 years of Ba'athist policies that marginalized the will of the Syrian people. You know, you have to take into consideration, whoever you are as a political actor, the will of the Syrian people. You cannot hijack this revolution. This is what we are trying to say. Give up on these attempts. It's a waste of time. We are here. Our administration is set. It's going to be all over Syria. The Syrian people will not be silent, no matter who will try to take over. They have gained their voice. They have gained their confidence. They are willing to sacrifice with the blood. They have proved this. We will continue to the very end. And we, the Syrian people, not us here on this table, the Syrian people will prevail.
For the efforts, we have made the best our efforts to join it. I mean, to be for this conference to be really representing the Syrian people. I mean, the
السلمية الموجودة على الأرض في سوريا أن يكون هناك تغييب لها في جنيف 2. النظام حاول أن يغيبنا عن السياسة على مدى 5 عقود، واليوم المعارض من يسمى بالمعارضة السورية في جنيف 2 يهمشنا ويبعدنا عن أن يكون لنا صوت في الحوار السياسي حول مستقبل سوريا. هذا يثير شبهات لدينا ويثير أسئلة عن حقيقة ذهاب أو جدوى جنيف 2 في تحقيق سلم أهلي وديمقراطية والدولة الديمقراطية التي يتطلع إليها الشعب السوري.
Yes. Could you come to a microphone?
نحن لا نرفض الحوار السوري إنما نرفض الحوار العربي السوري، فقط العربي. يعني ما يتم الآن في اجتماع جنيف هو حوار عربي لعربي، لا يوجد فيه المكونات الأخرى، لذلك نرفض هكذا حوار، إنما نريد حوارا ديمقراطيا حرا.
Yeah, what she's saying is that what is happening in Geneva 2 is an Arab dialogue, political dialogue, and this is what we reject as Kurds and Syriac. We want this to be a dialogue of all components of the Syrian people.
اوكي، حضرتك قلتي انه الحوار عربي عربي، وبالمقابل كمان هناك مكونات من المعارضه استبعدت من حوار جنيف، يعني هو بالاحرى حوار بين النظام السوري والائتلاف السوري المعارض، وليس فقط عربي عربي، يعني كمان في مكونات عربيه سوريه استبعدت من الحوار. هاي النقطه الاولى. النقطه الثانيه من فضلك استاذ صالح، هل برأيك حميد درويش وإبراهيم برو كافيين لتمثيل الكردي في وفد الائتلاف السوري المعارض اليوم الذي يحاور السلطة السورية في جنيف؟ وهم يقولون بأنهم ممثلون في الهيئة الكردية العليا. ما ردك على هذا الموضوع؟
I'm sorry, but people are looking at this conference and they don't understand. Could you please translate?
Maybe she can ask this question in English afterward?
No,
No?
she can't.
Then I will try to translate it. I
Yes.
wasn't taking notes, but I will try to
No,
summarize
yes,
her
yes.
question. خلصتي السؤال؟
بس كنت بدي كفي انه لما عرض عليكم انه تكونوا جزء من الائتلاف السوري المعارض، لماذا رفضتم؟ الم انتم تفوتوا الفرصه على انفسكم بالهيئه الكرديه العليا او حتى بالاتحاد الديمقراطي الكردستاني فرصه ان تكونوا ضمن وفد معارض؟
I'm going to try to summarize this. Our colleague here was asking about the Kurdish representation in Geneva too, and she was asking if Mr. Hamid Darwish and Brahim Buro, who are in the delegation of the coalition delegation, whether they represent the Kurdish interests or not. And she was asking about the Democratic Union of Kurdistan Party, which is Mr. Saleh Muslim represent, whether they have passed an opportunity by not accepting to join the opposition coalition, and why they have not joined the opposition
وعن الحوار
coalition.
العربي بس تقلون.
هاي أنا ما كنت واضح السؤال، ممكن تعيديه تبع الحوار العربي.
كنت عم بقول انه استبعدت مكونات اخرى من المعارضه، ولم يكن فقط استبعاد القوميات التي يعني الموجوده في سوريا لنقول بانه حوار عربي سوري.
And she was describing actually the situation that we cannot say that it's only a Syrian or Arab dialogue, because they're not just the Kurds and the Syriacs who have been not included in this delegation, but other Arab political forces and groups are not included in the delegation.
العرب المستبعدون هم الديمقراطيون.
So the Arabs who are not included are the pro-democracy Arabs.
الفئة التي تنادي بحقوق كافة القوميات في سوريا وتنادي بسوريا ديمقراطية هم المستبعدون.
Those who are not included are those who want Syria for all Syrians, not just Arabs or so these are the powers who and want a democratic Syria. Those are the Arabs and Syrian political forces who are not included.
بالنسبة للمؤتمر اللي أشرتي له، ما بعرف إذا جاوبتك بالإنجليزي بتفهمي؟ Yeah, just for the conference, I mean, we have mentioned was yesterday. We think it was a regime from one side, and the other side it was not the Syrian people, the opposition, which is representing the international forces. This is one. And secondly, for the representing of the Kurds, and so Mr. Hamid Darwish and Ibrahim Buro, they didn't. I mean, they joined it because they refused the Kurdish Supreme Committee, and we tried to put them as representatives of the Kurdish Supreme Committee, but they refused, and the coalition refused to join them till they said they don't belong to this Kurdish Supreme Committee. So they are not representing the Kurds at all. And even, I mean, the solution which we have done, I mean, this democratic administration, established in Rojava, we invited them, and we wait about 7 months for them just to come and join it, and they refused to join the solution for it. So just because of that, they are now in the coalition. They are not representing the Kurdish people.
Another question here.
عذرا سأطرح سؤالي باللغة العربية لو سمحتم لي.
I will translate.
سؤالي موجه للأستاذ صالح. علمنا أنكم شكلتم حكومة في المنطقة الكردية. يا ترى هل ستشركون حلفائكم الجدد في تلك الحكومة لو حدث وشكلتموها؟
The question is asking us, you have established a government, a new government in the Kurdish areas. Are you going to make your new include your new alliance to it? أنا ما بعرف يعني إذا كنت تقصد ما حلفائكم الجدد مين تقصد فيهم يعني؟
هذا المؤتمر هو لإعلان تحالف جديد حسب ما علمنا.
المؤتمر هذا لشرح وقائع، ولا التحالف موجود سابقا، الاتحاد السرياني، اخواننا السريان والسوريين، وهي الحكومة المشكلة اللي موجودة قامتها إذا بدك إياها بس
نكون مشكورين لو زودتمونا به. شكرا.
عند رفاقنا موجودة يعني فهي موجودة، مو هي ما هي حكومة، هي إدارة مدنية، مشان ما نقول هي إدارة مدنية تشكلت.
Maybe I'm sorry, but we don't understand you.
To try in English, he's saying the government elected. What I'm saying it's administration. It's not the government. This is first, and already we have many people sharing in it. Arabs, Syrians. So it's a new alliance. It's old. I mean, since maybe thousands of years. But we announced 2 years ago, 1 year ago. So we are working together on the ground. So it's not a new alliance.
There is another question here, and then we to finish.
Robert James Parsons from the Geneva Courier. This is a question on the practical level. In order to prevail in the end, you must have a state structure that functions. Otherwise, it'll be Libya or Iraq or Afghanistan again, or Palestine. Right now, the state structure that exists, to the extent that one functions at all, is in the hands of what generally is referred to as the regime, which is the structure created by Hafez al-Assad, and which Bashar al-Assad inherited and found himself unable to change. In fact, at the beginning, he tried to open things up, and they refused this, and he was forced to stop everything and backtrack. This structure exists, it exercises power, and it has enormous firepower. How do you propose then to replace it? Because in your own zone where you control things, you can create an administration that functions, and even democratically, but there's the rest of the territory, and there's also simply the need for the state to be able to implement its decisions and enforce law and order. And you do not have that as far as I can see, and those who do have that are those who have been in charge of the repression for decades, and totally apart from what Bashar al-Assad may represent as a figurehead. As far as I can see, it is the regime that is ruling. It is the regime that is leading this battle to keep the Syrian state intact. So on the one hand, those who are safe saving the state from disintegration are directly related to the repression that has gone on for so long. On the other hand, you who represent a new way have no serious something in a small area, and after you have drafted a constitution, then there's the step to the practical application thereof. What are your plans? Do you have any?
Wants to answer.
At least, I mean, this revolution has been 3 years it's going on. And what policies we had, we just defend ourselves. And when we liberated our areas, we had a fighting with the government forces, and then we pushed them out, and then we are fighting against those groups. So we have YPG forces, which is an armed forces protecting our areas. This is first. And secondly, we believe that the organized people that are the most, a structure can be built and protect themselves. So what we have done, we have organized our people, as the Kurd society and as the Syriacs and the other minorities in these areas. We are very well organized, and we have our police forces, for example, is Asaish, which is, containing all the Kurds, the Syriacs, and the Arabs all together. And also we have defending units, which is YPG, and so we have all the system already. The structure have been established in the areas, and this is, I think, the best way to protect our people. So we are not related to any. Not only the regime is trying to keep all Syria together. Also, we are part of this Syria, and we are looking for the unity of the Syria. And what we are doing now, as we mentioned before, is could be an example for future Syria. So it's democratic way to protect Syria from everything else. Even from the attacks from outside or from these extremist groups also.
Yes, if I may add that, we have cooperated as Syriac with our Kurdish brothers in our areas. We have our also own policing called Satoro. We have been able to establish peace in our areas and protect our citizens. And we have been able to stand in the way of Daesh, of Al-Qaeda from taking over our areas. And now we were able to put together an administration. I think this is a substantial accomplishment and a significant model for the rest of Syria. I think people like us who have worked on the ground to establish peace and to resist the forces of darkness who have tried to hijack the Syrian revolution, we are the ones who should be consulted and should be at the table to advance the aspirations of the Syrian people for a democratic, pluralistic, civil, secular Syria.
Thank you very much. We can go on with this discussion, drinking something together. Thank you very much to have informed us. Bye-bye.
Thank you.